Hey everybody, Citrus 3000 PSI here. I'm going to go over a WiiDual installation from start to finish. I have either a RVL 30 or 40 model here. I know that because it's black and has the GameCube ports. So that's the model we're going to be modding today. You will need a few things just for the initial teardown. A small set of tweezers, a PH1 Phillips screwdriver, a PH0 screwdriver, and a tri-wing screwdriver. This is the only one I have, so I fit in this DeWalt tool. So first things first, let's go ahead and pull off these. These just pull straight up. Seems like a lot of these in the wild now all have broken tabs though, so be careful pulling them up. And we're going to use our PH0 screwdriver, and we're just going to remove these 3 screws. Now you can kind of keep track of these if you want to, or if you just follow the video, I will tell you which ones go where when we re-put everything back together. So just keep them all in a pile, and you'll be good. This just pulls up, kind of clips out right there, and then pulls forward. Set that off to the side. Now we do not remove these screws. So take your tri-wing, and we're going to go ahead and remove these 2 right here. Alright, those are done. Now let's flip it onto the side. We're going to need to pull off these 2 plastic covers, as they will, and these 2 rubber covers in the back. So I'm going to do the rubber covers, and how I like to do it. So these sometimes don't like to come on, so I do the best I can to make them not broken. So what I'll do is I'll take a pair of tweezers and try and get underneath, because they are just glued on. And then once I get enough to pull, I'll pull it off. And then I'll set them off to the side and make sure not to not to try and lose any sticky residue, so maybe they will go back on. You can glue them back on if they have lost all their stickiness. And this one is being difficult. Alright, there we go. That one's off. Now these 2 screws I just pulled that are underneath here are tri-wings as well. Let's change my torque. I don't think I got this one. There we go. They should fall out, but if they don't, if one fell out, if they don't, just leave it there and we can get back to it later. Alright, let's do the ones on the front. These have a little paper, self-adhesive paper in front of them. Same thing, just pull it off, put them to the side. I mean, all this stuff is definitely for aesthetics. The rubber feet are more important because that's what the console sits on. So if these plastic ones break, it's not a huge deal. But I like to put them back on because I think it looks better. And again, this is a tri-wing. Alright, now let's work our way to this side. Take your PH0 screwdriver, and we're going to remove the battery port. And then there is another tri-wing underneath that. And then we've got another one of these guys. And another tri-wing. Alright, and then one more to do, which is this guy right here. Okay. Nice and easy. And then this is just the PH0 screw. And once you take this last screw out, that's not one to come. Okay. Once you take that last screw out, this front part will come off now. Make sure there's no SD card. It'll just pull straight off. There is a cable underneath. Just unplug it and set it to the side. So now at this point the case is pretty much free. There are 2 screws underneath here, but you do not need to remove them. So what we're going to do is we're going to set it on its back. Take your hands. Looks like that one screw fell off. Take your hands and just pull the top off. You can see those screws we did not remove hold this metal shield in. The metal shield comes off though. So next step is a whole bunch of screws to remove. I normally remove the DVD drive first, so let's do that. There'll be 4 screws. If you have a magnetic screwdriver, it does help on these because they will fall in. Just a recommendation. So now what you want to do is try and make this easiest to see. So once this is loose with the 4 screws, you just pull straight up like this on the one side. The side away from the GameCube ports. Let's see if you can see in there. So you can see there's a cable, power cable. So what you can do is you can pull. This is going to be difficult to do on camera, but you can pull it and that'll loosen that right up. And then you'll have plenty of room to unplug the cable and then pop the flip lock and undo it. DVD drive is free. You also can remove the ribbon cable as well. It just pulls straight out from the clip going this direction, that direction. Cable's free. You can't do anything with the FFC cable yet. So now I normally like to remove all of the I guess this has to go in order, so let's go ahead and remove these antennas. They kind of just unwind. Now on this antenna there's a clip right here. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. Yeah, you can kind of see it. So there's a clip right here. We'll use this so it's easier to see. So what you want to do is you just want to push that to the left. And this one. And that will free that right out. Simple as that. Alright, let's zoom back out. Okay. And this just comes out around. So now let's go ahead and remove these 2 metal shields. Here's one. Move these out of the way. This will lift straight up. And this shield right here in the back. 3 screws. And this will just lift straight up. And there we go. So now we can remove this front black shield, whatever you want to call it. Make sure your screwdriver is small enough to get inside the holes. It will just lift straight up. Now one thing I want to focus on here before I do this, because this is going to be a lost nut for a lot of people, is this nut right here. So that is just sitting in there in a clip, so when we pull this out, this nut will fall right out right here. It just fell out for me right there. So just make sure you keep track of it and don't lose it, because if you lose it, you will not be able to screw in the battery door. Alright, let's zoom back out. Let's remove a couple more screws. This black piece has 3 screws, 1 in the middle, 1, 2, and 3. Comes right out. Put it off to the side. Now we're going to do this back black piece. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. Go ahead and unplug the fan cable as well. Let's get these 4 screws out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this will come, oh, sorry, there's 5. There's one right here, I missed it. Don't forget that screw. Alright, this will pull straight up. Now we're going to go ahead and remove all the screws on the outside, and that will free up the metal top heat shield, or not heat shield, but FFC regulations, blah blah blah. Just go ahead and remove all these all around the sides. And then these 2 screws in the middle. And that will free this metal plate. Now what I like to do, it's kind of tight sometimes, so I kind of start from the back. There is a little bit of a thermal pad on this part right here, so it's sticking to that right now. It's not a lot of force, but I'm going to make sure all these screws are on this. Alright, so next we need to modify this bottom shield. You don't actually have to use a shield if you don't want to, but I recommend keeping it in. It'll keep things aligned a little better. What we need to do is we need to remove this, pretty much this whole section right here. So on this piece, it's easier just to use your fingers and just bend it back and forth till it snaps off. Sometimes this one will bend with your hand, sometimes it won't. It's currently not bending with my hand. So grab just like a pair of pliers and just straighten it out, like so. Then we're going to bend it right on that crease and it'll snap right off. And then again, where there's a little bit of a notch right here, this needs to be flat. So let's go ahead and break that off. And then there's also a little line. I like to just bend that flat. And then we need to remove this guy right here. So flatten this out. And then grip up to the actual line part, and then we're just going to bend back and forth and it will snap off. I usually just kind of push it down and then grab a pair of side cutters. We're going to remove this and this. So go ahead and just clip off. Watch your eyes. Not cutting. Let's go on this side a little bit. Okay. And also just re-flatten stuff out with your pair of pliers. Alright, now we're back with the bottom shield. What we want to do is, this is the back side of the Wii, so we want it to take off just a little tiny, in this case it's black, but what we're going to do is we're going to remove this little bit right here. Just clip it off, and that's all you need to do. And in this case will fit right back in, like so. And now once that's in, we'll go on to the next step. Alright, now on to the fun part. So I've got the main board right here. This is right behind the multi-out that we're looking at right now. And we're going to focus on these parts right here. So these right here are the RGB lines. And then right here is the composite line. So you've got a couple options. If you do not want to lose composite video, then you do not remove these components right here. Now getting an RGB SCART cable to work with this without removing composite makes things very difficult, as you will have to build your own custom SCART cable, as there is nothing off the shelf that will work not on composite video. There is a way to use one of the data lines for one of the D terminal cables. That's not going to be talked about in this video, but what I am going to do, I am going to remove composite. But if you want composite video, do not remove these set of components. These right here are the RGB lines, and these need to be removed, these three. So I'll go ahead and remove the RGB lines first, and then I will go ahead and remove the composite last. So let's just get in there. Now you actually really only need to remove this this and that. You don't have to remove this, but sometimes it just makes it easier just to get it out of the way. So I just recommend removing it. Now I'm just going to do the normal, like, fill it with solder. So it gets on both sides. I'm using a pretty small bevel tip right here. So I'm kind of put quite a bit of solder on. Getting quite a bit here. There we go. Okay, off. And just keep working your way. Removing these. I'm going to start removing these RGB lines still. There's one. If we can. Alright, one more little component right here. I actually probably can zoom in a little bit on this. Might make it easier for you guys to see. Alright. A little tombstone capacitor right here. Alright, so this is what is mandatory. The RGB lines had to be removed. Now, like I said, this top part is composite. I'm going to go ahead and remove it because I'm going to go ahead and do a SCART setup for this. Now, component video will still work fine with composite. This is just for SCART, RGBS with sync. So now, this is not necessary, but I like to clean the pads up, so I'm going to use a little bit of braid, and I'm just going to do a quick little cleanup real quick. Just light pressure, don't need to do anything hard. That way if you ever do want to put these parts back, you can, because the mod is reversible. Alright, those are all clean now. I'm going to get my isotope alcohol, which is right here. Just get that little couple squirts. I'm just going to do a little bit of a clean up with a paper towel. And there we go. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and flip the board over, and we need to do a little bit of prep work on the multi-out. So the mod will sit right on top of the multi-out, so you can see, get my stuff lined up here. So about this, got too much stuff on the table. Alright, so you can see we've got this row of pads right here. You can see that they're oval pads, not circle. So we need to make those, we need to remove solder on the bottom side so the board sits flat. This is non-leaded solder, so use a little bit of flux, grab your soldering braid. I'll go ahead and zoom in on this. Watch more what I'm doing. And I'm just going to hit the one side. I'm not going to go all the way around because it's not necessary. Now this is a ground pad, as it's not wanting to go. I'll go back to that. Let's get a little cleaner area of my braid. That's on the ground pad. And you're just being quick. You don't actually want to remove all the solder from the holes, because then you'll get a disconnect. I might remove a little solder on that. It looks pretty fat over there on this guy. So I'm just going to take a little bit off. It'll probably fit around it, but I want to not have any room with tightness. So this is going to take some heat. I'm going to go and up my iron a little bit. It's just, there it goes. Just going to get over on that side too. Alright. Now let's go ahead and do a quick test fit of the board. I want to make sure that the board lays flat. Go ahead and zoom out for you. Let's see. Yep, it's laying pretty flat. Maybe looks like there might be something a little more over here, so let me do a little bit more removal. Get a little more flux in there. Cut this off. It's looking a little crummy. Sometimes what will help too is actually adding leaded solder. That'll sometimes help removing solder, as it has a lower melting point. Let's go ahead and do a little bit over here too. I'm using a JVC iron, and it's got pretty good. Can really push out some heat if it needs to, like that. So other irons might take a little longer. Let's do another test fit. Go ahead and remove a little bit more on that one side. Right here again, because I think it was hitting on that. Let's put a little more flux on there. See how she lays now. It's laying quite a bit better. Alright, and we're done. Alright, so now for the real fun part. We're going to be installing the flex cable on the AVE chip here. The camera might make the chip look bigger than what it really looks like, but it actually is fairly small. So here's the flex cable. Actually, before we put the flex cable on, we need to remove a capacitor. And it is this capacitor C43 right here. So just like before, let's go ahead and dump some solder on until it frees up, like so. And then go ahead and clean the pads off. Now this needs to be perfectly flat as well. Now what I'm going to recommend is using some flux. I use liquid flux. This is a true no clean. You don't need to clean it off. Some no cleans you actually do have to clean it off. They assume that you're going to put it in an oven. This is more of an alcohol-based flux. So this has the capacitor replaced on the FFC. So really how I usually do this is, since we're going to 3 sides of the chip may not always be placed exactly the same, and the edge cuts on the chip or on the FFC cable may be slightly off. You never can get a true consistent edge cut. So what I'm going to recommend is getting this main side aligned and then kind of just seeing how everything else aligns, so seeing if we need to adjust it, etc. So let's see here. It looks like that's fairly good. What I may do, looks like a couple of those holes we should be able to get it to go in. So I'm going to get a little closer look here. And we're going to do that. See how I got it over those pins just a little bit? That way we're closer over here to that. So my hand is holding it in place. I'm going to take a little bit of solder. And one thing is, you definitely don't want to use too much solder, and you want to keep your iron a little bit lower. Mine's at 305 right now, because you don't want to burn the FFC cable. Now what I'm doing is I'm kind of just tacking it in place, not trying to get perfect joints right now. Just in case I actually have to remove it for whatever reason, I can. So now let's take a look down at pin 1 and 2, which look to be lined up pretty good. Put a little more flux down there. Don't need that much solder, just a tiny drop. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch it. Let's get a little better connection. Yep, so there's a solder bridge. That'll be a good example of how to get rid of that. And then we're going to do the top. Let's look at the top right here. I'm going to let that solder bridge cool. I'm not going to mess with that just yet. I think a lot of people will tend to get really worried, and then they'll try and just hack at it, and we're going to go back and revisit it properly. But first, let's get the rest of the chip in place. I'm just tacking this up here, because I will rotate the board so it's easier for me to solder. Now I'm going to go ahead and put some more flux right here. And we're going to work on this side. We're going to get all these in real nice. See if I can't zoom in a little more on this. I'm not really drag soldering, I'm just going up and down. I'm using the solder that's already really on the pins, and I'm letting that flow up and the cable falls down. I'm not staying at any pin too long. I'm not going to sit there and try and, if one's not soldering right, I don't sit there and try and just keep soldering. That is what will burn the flex cable up. I'm going to add a little bit more solder and a little bit more flux. So I've got a couple of ridges. We'll go ahead and pull those straight down. Just trying to get a nice little even distribution so it looks nice. We do a ridge here still. We're just pulling it around to try and get some of the solder away so I can wick it off with my iron and put it in my steel wool thingamajig. It's not steel wool, but it's copper, so it can remove stuff off the iron. Alright, and this looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and rotate the board now. We are going to work on this bridge over here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some more flux on it. Make sure my tip is clean. And I'm just going to pull some off. See a little pulled off. I'm going to clean my tip again. Clean my tip again. Clean my tip again. Sorry about that. Tip's getting pretty clean. I'm going to put some more flux on, because I probably removed it all already. Clean my tip again. And bridge is gone. See if you can see that better. Okay. Alright, and now we got that done. We're going to go work on this other side, which are the audio pins and ground. So there we go. Again, I'm going to apply this flux. This flux is alcohol based, so it dries out really quickly. If you're using like a paste flux, you do not necessarily need to keep applying it like I do, because it will stay on the board until you burn it off. So just put a little solder on here. Actually, I don't need any solder. We're just gonna touch all these up, touch the pins. Just getting good, nice connections. And those look really good. And there you have it. There is the flex cable soldered in. Now what I will do is I will actually still do a little bit of cleaning. That no clean does actually clean up real nice, but I still like to just kind of put a little 99% isopropyl and just kind of wipe it all off, and you can see how good it makes those joints look. And that's pretty much what you should be looking for. Nice, clean, no bridges, solid connections. And let's go ahead and jump on to the next step, which is going to be soldering on the HDMI cable. One thing we need to do with that first, let's go ahead and move the board out of the way, is this is the, let's get it focused in here. This is the HDMI, mini HDMI that connects to the side. What we need to do is, recommend turning your iron back up to some good heat. And then we're going to go ahead and remove the solder back here, because this needs to lay as flat as possible. So take some more solder braid. We are just going to remove it. Like so. One done. Oh, the other's done. Flip it over. Go ahead and just tack these on the side, just to make sure it's nice and flowed down there. These connectors are actually soldered on very well, so you don't have to really worry about that. But you can see that now they are a lot flatter, and that's what we want. So now let's get our board back over, and this will just sit on like so. If I can zoom out at all. So let's add some more flux. And I soldered this on with pretty high heat. I don't sit there and bake the pins though, so I feel like I'm kind of like in and out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just get the first one on. I want to make sure it's going out straight. And
looks pretty straight. Just going to solder one pin. See how it kind of just moved? So I'm going to move it back. And it's still not straight. Okay, check for straightness because you can still move it. May not be able to see this, but I'm going to move it around. I don't think it is perfectly straight, so I'm going to reheat that pin up. Rotate it just a little bit. Alright, there, we're good now. Okay, we can just solder from this side. I'm going to do all the small pins first. Here you got some big grounds. Just let your iron put some leaded solder on, or unleaded, or sorry, leaded. Let it melt. It'll help melt the existing solder below. This is really just for support. It does use ground here, but it's not. There's a lot of other pins of ground as well, but it is used for support, so it is necessary. Just dump a little more in. Alright, we are secure. Now what we'll do is clean this area right now with 99%. I'm going to take a little brush, just help kind of break that up. Take another paper towel and just kind of stamp it up. There we go. Nice clean connection. Now we're going to go ahead and do the main board. Get this moved around here. Alright. So the main board drops on, and you can see it lays over those holes. Let's make sure. So we are off a little bit. Let's see why we're off. Okay, there's actually still a little bit more solder in this one spot. It's not allowing me to sit where I want it to sit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of leaded solder, just so that is easier to pick off now. Go and get stuff on the sides too. It was pretty much making the board sit too far back, because a lot of stuff has to line up here. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs to be close. So there, see, now the pins are more centered. We're off that. We're close on there. So yeah, so you can see we're close on the holes for the FFC. We are close on this connector over here. What we were getting stuck on was, it seemed like this resistor right here was not letting the board sit flat right there. But it is now. So what we're going to do is, once you get your good position in, we're going to go and hold the board down. I'm going to drop some flux in. Just get my iron going. Hand is still holding the board down. Doing everything else with my right hand. Got a little solder on my tip. Just going to try and drop a little in just to tack it in. Get this dirty. There we go. I usually use these small holes to tack it in because it flows in a lot easier than a big hole. So So they were tacked. Still want to make sure the board is flat. So as I do this connection, I will push down. Push down on that. So now we've got good connections all around. Board's flat. We're going to go ahead and start soldering these in. Okay, go in. This is the ground. Let's take a little bit more heat. Just working our way around the board. My iron right now is actually still pretty hot, I think. Yes, it is. It's upper 300C. I'm just not staying very long on spots. I like to solder these holes with the solder extra hot. It helps it really flow down the hole, make sure it's getting a good connection. Let's go ahead and solder these large ground pores. Kind of flow around. Okay, clean my iron off. When you run your iron hotter, it gets a lot of debris and gunk. So let's get that off. This other big ground pour. You can see this ground pour is going a little faster because I've heated up the entire ground plane doing that first one. See, that one went real fast. Alright, and then while we're here, so we've got jumpers 1, 2, and 3. This is where the C-Sync comes in. So you want to jump 2 and 3 for C-Sync going to composite video. If you jump 2 and 1, it will send composite video over to this pin, which is a D-terminal pin, which only the Japanese Wii's use. So if you have a Japanese Wii, you need to remove those components. I actually don't have a Japanese Wii, so I cannot tell you what to remove. But if you probably send me some screenshots, I can probably tell you where to check. That's going to wire composite video up with C-Sync. If you opted to leave composite video in place, then you would actually just leave this open. Your component would still work, and your sync on green would still work fine. So now we are soldered there. Let's go ahead and work our way to soldering this flex cable side. See if I can't zoom in at all on this. Alright, so now make sure your iron is not hot. I'm going to drop it back down to maybe 310. Sounds pretty good to me. And then we're going to drop some flux in. And we're just going to start at the top. What we're going to do is I'm just going to touch the FFC with the iron, push some flux in. It's going to suck it in and then make contact with the half hole slash castellation. Goal here is to not bridge it. If you do bridge it, you can clean it up, but you're having to use braid on the flex, which is not recommended. And we've got this last one, which is a ground, and there we go, all soldered up. Now we've got a few more things to do on the board. Right up here we have just a little jumper. This is just there to help keep things secure, just to make sure the board is there or connected. And there is one more over here. On this big resistor. Push it down on the board, make sure it's flat. It is. Got good contact. And then we are almost done with soldering. I'll zoom out a little bit. Next thing we're going to do, this is optional. There is built-in OSD with the remote, but you can use the gamepad. To do the gamepad, we're going to solder a wire to port 1. Coincidentally, you can solder to the other ports, 2, 3, and 4 if you want to. We're going to solder to test point P27. Just going to put a little solder on there. Then we're going to come down here to the side. We're going to put a little solder on this pad, which is labeled P. These other pads right here are for Toslink. If you want Toslink, this is 3.3 ground data output for the Toslink. And let's see, let's get some wire. I recommend a 28 gauge or less, I guess, bigger. 30 gauge does work, but it's kind of sometimes it can be inconsistent. Probably because the run is so long. So I'm going to use a 28 gauge. Just a 28 gauge Teflon coated wire, stranded. So first thing, we're gonna just prep this. Make sure it lays pretty flat. I don't like that bend. I'm gonna go ahead and move it a little bit because you got to make sure that it clears all of the holes going on the board. And then I'll show you my final run when I'm done. Go in there. So then let's go ahead and just cut this off. Strip it. Turn the board around. To just touch this. We're on. I'm going to put a little more flux on that. And maybe a little more solder. Then we're going to, let's see here, the cable's not laying very flat. So it's because the cable's twisted. What you can do though is you can go back over here, release this, releases a little bit of pressure. Try and get it as flat as we can. But it doesn't have to be perfectly flat. Alright, we are officially done with soldering. So if you got this far, congratulations. Next step is we need to plug in the FFC cable that's supplied. This will hook up the HDMI portion of the mod. So go ahead and open this connector up. Just use your fingernails. And then contacts face down. You can see they're not wanting to go in, but they will. There they went in. Close it. Alright. And then this right here, the simplest way, let's see if I can't zoom out at all. Nope, I can't. See if that doesn't help. What we're going to do is we're going to bend it, and you see this white line right here. We're going to try and make this cable parallel to that, right on that white line. What you want to do is just kind of barely press down. Don't try and crease it with your fingernail or anything. Just keep it slightly bent. So we're going to go down. And then we're going to go up and underneath it. And then let's go ahead and open this connector up. underneath. This is contacts down. That's why we had to go underneath, because the contacts would face up if we just did a straight 90 bend. Let's see here, let's get this to go in. It's really not working for me, but just don't give up. There it goes in. Clamp it down, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just push this down. Not real hard. If you push too hard, you can actually bend the copper inside the cable and disconnect it. So from there, we are almost done. I'm going to spray a little isopropyl alcohol over this board. A little on the flex. Just going to do a little bit of a cleanup. Just a nice light scrub. Nothing too hard. And we'll just go ahead and just soak up the rest with this paper towel. And if you've gotten this far, great. Now we are going to go on to the next step.
Okay, so now we're ready to test fit the motherboard. We're going to go ahead and drop it in. We still need to cut the bottom HDMI part out. So with it in, let me try and zoom in on this. We're going to make a little, with the motherboard kind of in those little boss holes. We're going to see where the HDMI lines up, and we're going to make a mark. We're just going to go straight down just a little bit. We're going to go pull the board out. We're also going to pull the heat shield out just to make it easier. There is a little plastic nub. Cut that off. It actually doesn't do anything. I think it was part of the molding process. But from here, let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so my mark was right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove just a little bit of material. You'll see that there's two notches. I'm just going to kind of try and cut down to that notch right below it, just barely. And then I'm going to take a file. I'm just going to run a file just to try and clean it up. And my goal is to get to that bottom notch, so it just barely hits that bottom notch. And you can see how much I've removed already. So now my goal is just to make this look perfectly flat and straight, because if it's not, when the HDMI connector is in there, it will look wrong because it's not flat and straight. So just kind of just work your way around, and that looks pretty good. I've done a lot of these, so I know how to do them pretty well. So when you do it, maybe go a little slower. Don't remove as much material, because once you remove material, you can't put it back. And let's do a quick test fit and see how we look. That's pretty much perfect. So next step is we're going to test the unit to make sure it works. So all we need to do that is put on the heatsink. And you actually don't have to put the heatsink on, but I do just to kind of make it easier to hold things down. So these are the long screws. I'm just going to put 2 in. I'm not going to put all 4 in, because we'll have to remove this board. So let's go ahead and get my system fired up here. We're going to give the board power. We are going to give HDMI. Let me grab my component cable that's not plugged in. I like to check all the outputs. I've done enough of these to know you want to make sure everything works before you put it back together. Because I have removed I have put many together only to take them back apart. The only thing that needs to happen for the Wii to operate is this Wi-Fi / remote antenna needs to be plugged in. If that is not plugged in, the Wii will not boot. You'll just get a black screen. So from there, we're going to go ahead and turn my monitor. I'm going to go ahead and boot her up. Alright, switch syncs on my TV. Alright, I got components. Waiting for my HDMI TV to come up. Let's see here. Let me sync this remote. Hit the sync button. The remote is synced. Alright. Now we're going to open up the OSD. Turn on the enhanced DVI. And it works. And I've got sound. Alright, from there you can go ahead and turn everything back off. You can go ahead and pull the heatsink back out. Alright, now the heatsink's back off. Before we start reassembly, we need to put the button in for the OSD. Or not for the OSD, but for the remote. So to do the button, how I do it is, I set everything in the case, and then I pull up, and you can see the button is, I can zoom in here a little bit so you guys can see better. So this is the button right here. It's really, really small and actually very fragile. So we'll want to drill a hole right about here. You don't want to go right in the middle. You don't want to go too low, but if you go too high, it'll be too high. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make it kind of center of inside the body, inside this. So right there is pretty much where I like to drill my hole. I will just take it's a 1/8 drill bit. Just do it nice and easy. Don't gotta drill fast. And then you go ahead and just put in, zoom back out, put in the little 3D printed button. The square should fit in nicely. Now you have to be very careful putting this in. If you don't put it in correctly, the button will grab and it'll break it. So I've got the motherboard up at kind of a high angle. Make sure the button is flat up against it. Keep the motherboard at a high angle and drop it in. And test the button to make sure it works. So right now the button is still making good contact. I'm actually holding the board down because the board can actually lift up and the button will get underneath the button, and then if you tighten down with the button not seated correctly, it will just break it. So keep pressure on it while we screw the heatsink down. And still make sure it makes good contact. It is. The button is not critical to use, but if you want to tie a remote to the unit, you need to have the button. On our top shield, another trick, don't forget this flex cable. Can't tell you how many times that I've put the shield on and just smashed the flex cable down in there. So, or if you take the flex cable off, forget to put the flex cable in. So now we're going to go ahead and push that down. Make sure that this part right here falls in. That pin right here.
There's a little guide pin. With that said, I'm going to put 2 more screws in. Right here, these are the short screws. So there's only one long screw left. That's a Phillips, and we will get to that in a second. But if you notice, there's little arrows. There's one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one here, one there. That tells you where you need to put screws in all the spots, except for right here. You put that screw in later, so it's kind of deceiving. But so put all screws in where there's arrows, except there. And these are all the short screws. And when you're putting screws in, just keep it pretty much hand tight. So we're skipping that one. We're going to do this. You easily could overpower these screws, easily, and strip them. Not the screws, but the plastic itself. So I just kind of get them, just nudge them tight, and that's all I do. Alright, still need a small one. Alright, so now I am going to put this guy in. And I actually already have the screws in, they never came out. So these are 2 blacks that are non-tris. There's only 2 style of blacks. Actually, there's 3. Ones that are, or 4. Ones that are really tiny, and then ones that are standard. These are the standard kind of long black screws. And I'm just going to go ahead and drop this in. Screw the black guys in. There is a guide pin on this side. Make sure it goes in. Screw that in, and then screw this in. Then we're going to go ahead and do the front plate. And my screws are, looks like I got some of the connectors. My screws are 3 blacks, all the same size, all standard. It just drops in. Like so. And I'm putting these parts on first now. Make sure the Wi-Fi cables go in correctly into this hole. Which mine don't really seem to be, so I'm going to make it kind of free with tweezers. Alright, so now since that's on, I'm going to do a quick test. I'm going to grab the DVD drive. Just like I said, the console will not boot without the DVD drive. So first, let's go ahead and take this cable. The cable with the banding goes on the bottom, and what you'll do is it'll just sit in flat. And sometimes you can use a pair of tweezers to make sure it's in. It's not in. There we go. I'm going to plug this in, which has black screw, black screw, black screw, black screw. Already has a lot of the black screws in. Sometimes it's easier just to let them stay in their places. And we're going to go ahead and screw this in. Plug in your fan cable. And then one more black screw will go up here in this hole. Now let's take this guy. My screws are still in place. Actually, one's missing. So you'll have 2 longs and 1 short. Silver screws, non-tris. The only tri screws are on the outside of the case. Everything else is on the inside is a P1 screw. So make sure that these fall in properly. Do the 2 longs. And we've got the 1 short. Alright, now this piece next, what it does is it fits underneath here. Goes right there, and these are all
silver shorts. And there's 3 of them. Let's see, I am appears to be missing a silver short. Oh, here it is. Remember to keep your screws in place. This table's dirty. So, alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hook these up. I usually do the longer one first. So what I'm doing is it wraps like this. Goes through this little thingamabob up and over that, and then through there, and then comes up around. Take a pair of pliers, as it likes to go underneath this little black plastic piece. Help hold it in, up and around and over, and it goes just like that. And take your last long black screw, which I just saw mine, and now I don't see it. There it is. Take your long black screw, screw it in, and you can kind of push that down. Now take this guy, wrap it at the same spots, and then it just pushes straight down. Clips in automatically. Alright, so now we are ready for the CD-ROM to go in. Or DVD-ROM, I'm sorry. So we're going to go ahead and connect this flat flex. Again, just put it in, push it down. This guide's going to assume that you know how to do a lot of connectors and flex connectors and things like that. And then when you're putting this in, push this back into this little cubby right here, and then just drop her on. Oh, I almost forgot. I always forget this one too. So remember that little bolt I told you not to forget, the square one? I about forgot. So it's gonna go right in that spot. And what you do is just drop it in that little crevice and push down, pair of pliers, and it locks in. Alright. Now we're going to screw in the DVD drive. I recommend a magnetic one for this, for really these 2 screws, because you have to put it into the hole. If you don't have a magnetic screwdriver, you can drop them in with like a pair of pliers, and then screw it in. But it's easier just to one shot shebang. Alright, now we need to file the back HDMI part for the top shell. Just drop on the case. Don't put it all the way in. I like to push it more up here in the top. And then this kind of comes down. And then we'll stop right there. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to make a mark right where my other cut is. Lift this up, then I'm going to make that cut straight up. Remove the case. Make sure I can get this centered on camera. So I can see my mark right here. Let me get some more light in here. Okay, that gives a little more light. So there's a mark right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut flush down to the bottom ridge and just cut that little groove off. I'm going to go back cut it. The only reason I do this is just this tells me exactly where I need to cut. So you can see what I meant by that ridge. That's the groove that goes underneath. I just cut that off. So I know exactly where I need to cut so I don't overshoot it. And what I do is I just take some side cutters and I just go up barely on this. I kind of know how high to cut, so I recommend you cut low, that way you don't overshoot it. Then once you get a lot of it cut, and the reason I don't cut just straight across off the get-go is the plastic will more than likely crack and you'll get little spider cracks. That just kind of makes that section a little smooth. Now my goal is just to square this off. Just kind of getting rid of most of the big material. Now I'm just going to take a file. Now, like I said, I'm just trying to square it off. Just make it flat and parallel. Okay, that's pretty good. Now you might need to check your test fit. I think my test fit will be pretty good, but what you want to do before you test fit it, after you kind of get your notch cut out, you need to cut a little small groove, like a 45-degree bevel on the back side. Sometimes this back plastic part will catch the PCB that holds the HDMI connector, and it will put a lot of stress on if it does. This just kind of negates that. So, and we're not cutting to the outside surface, we're just putting a 45-degree on the back side. See if we can get that to zoom in. So we're still perfectly flat on this side, 45 on the inside. Alright, let's give this a test fit. Perfect. We'll zoom in a little bit. So that's what it should look like. No strain, I'm not putting any pressure on it with the case. Just a nice, clean fit. Start on the bottom side. We've got, so now we've got pretty much just silver tries, black tri screws, and small Phillips screws. So the silver tries are going to go in these two holes. Change my torque a little bit. Remember, don't over torque them. You'll just end up stripping the case. And then we're going to take our black tries. Oh, no, not those yet. Sorry. Jumping the gun. This is going to be a silver tri right here and right there. And then while you're here, you can go ahead and put in the battery holder. Take your small P0 screwdriver, and then take your other long black screw that's not tri, and that goes in right there. And holds that front faceplate on. And you should have two small, very tiny black screws left. And they go in these two spots. Alright, now we should have two tries left. They are going to go in these two spots.
and we're pretty much done. You've got your little rubber connectors. Don't forget to put those on. And then your other top plates. There's a couple other rubbers on the bottom too. Don't forget those. But that's pretty much the installation process. I would go ahead and do a full test. Make sure the controller works with the gamepad, stuff like that. But you should be good to go.